Priya Venkatesh answered the question before Steve Harvey finished asking it. He'd gotten to, "Name something your husband does that drives you," and she hit the buzzer and said, "Breathe." Not breathing, not the way he breathes, just the single word, breathe, delivered with the flat conviction of a woman who had been married for 27 years and meant every letter. Steve Harvey's mouth opened. Nothing came out. He turned to the audience like he was looking for help. He turned back to Priya. He looked at the board. He looked at the ceiling. Then his legs folded and he sat down on the stage floor, holding his stomach, laughing so hard that no sound was coming out of his body. The audience was screaming. A producer ran toward the stage. Steve waved him away without looking. The board flipped. Number one answer. And Steve Harvey, still sitting on the floor of his own show, pointed at Priya Venkatesh and said, "That woman is dangerous." It was October 11th, 2021, in Atlanta, Georgia, and the Venkatesh family had driven 9 hours from Naperville, Illinois. Priya, her husband Rajesh, their daughter Ananya, age 16, and their son Dev, age 13. Priya's mother, Shakuntala Iyer, 81 years old, sat in the front row wearing a turquoise sari and holding a Ziploc bag full of homemade murukku because she did not trust American snack food. On the opposite podium stood the Martinez family from San Antonio, Texas, Carlos and Diana Martinez, and their 3 adult children, returning champions who had won 2 straight games and $40,000. The Martinezes were loose, practiced, ready. The Venkatesh family had spent the drive rehearsing answers, while Rajesh complained that Priya was too honest for television. But nobody in that studio knew what was about to happen. Priya Venkatesh was born in Coimbatore, India, in 1972, the eldest daughter of a college professor and a homemaker. She earned a degree in biochemistry from the University of Madras, graduated first in her class, and was accepted to a doctoral program in the United States. Her father sold a piece of ancestral land to buy her plane ticket. At the airport, he held both her hands and said, "Make them remember your name." She arrived in Columbus, Ohio, in September 1994, with 1 suitcase and a folder full of research papers she had annotated in 4 colors of ink. She met Rajesh Venkatesh in the university library 3 weeks later. He was an engineering student who couldn't find the photocopier. She showed him where it was, and also showed him that his thesis had a calculation error on page 41. He asked her to dinner. She said no. He asked again. She said no again. He asked a 3rd time and brought a corrected copy of page 41. She said yes. They married in 1996 in a ceremony at a Hindu temple in Columbus, attended by 11 people, 7 of them students who came primarily for the free food. For 3 years, their life in Columbus was small and full. Priya worked toward her PhD while teaching undergraduate labs. Rajesh finished his engineering degree and took a job at a manufacturing firm in Naperville. They moved in 1999. Ananya was born in 2005, Dev in 2008. Priya's doctoral research on antibiotic-resistant bacteria in municipal water systems was 18 months from completion. Then, the university cut funding for her department. Her advisor left for a position in Germany. Her research was orphaned. 7 years of work, 4 colors of ink, 11 published papers, and a letter that said, "We regret to inform you that your program has been discontinued." She didn't tell Rajesh for 2 weeks. Every morning she got in the car and drove to a park 3 miles from their house and sat in the parking lot reading journals on her laptop. She told him she was going to campus. The campus was 300 miles away. That was the lie. And that wasn't even the part that made Steve cry. Priya took a job as a quality control technician at a pharmaceutical lab in Naperville, testing pill coatings, checking batch numbers, work that used approximately 4% of her training. She made $52,000 a year. Her supervisor was 26, had a bachelor's degree, and once asked her to explain what biochemistry was. She explained it politely. She went to the bathroom and pressed her forehead against the tile wall for 3 minutes. Then she went back to work. The money was enough. Barely. Rajesh's firm downsized in 2015 and cut his salary by $18,000. They refinanced the house. They canceled the kids' summer programs. Priya picked up weekend shifts at the lab, 12-hour Saturdays testing samples in a windowless room. She told the children she enjoyed the overtime. Dev, who was 7 at the time, said, "Mama, if you like it so much, how come you don't smile when you come home?" Priya's throat closed. She knelt down and pulled him against her and said she was just tired. Dev put his hand on her cheek and said, "You're always tired, Mama. That's not the same as okay." She held him there so he could not see her face. By 2019, Priya had been at the pharmaceutical lab for 14 years. She had trained 4 supervisors, each younger than the last. She had published 0 papers. Her doctoral research sat in a filing cabinet in the basement, 370 pages of work that no one would ever read. She stopped mentioning her PhD. When new coworkers asked about her background, she said, "I studied science in India." She removed ABD, biochemistry, from her email signature. She stopped reading journals. She told Rajesh she was fine. Shakuntala, Priya's mother, flew from Coimbatore to Naperville every winter and stayed for 3 months. She noticed things. She noticed Priya waking at 4:30 a.m. and sitting at the kitchen table staring at nothing. She noticed the filing cabinet was locked. One morning in January 2021, she sat down across from Priya at 4:45 a.m. and said, in Tamil, "A locked cabinet is just a heart with a key. Who are you hiding from?" Priya looked at her mother, and for the first time in 14 years, she cried about her research. Not softly, the kind of crying that makes your ribs hurt. Shakuntala held her daughter's hand and said, "You will go on that show, and you will make them remember your name." The audition tape was filmed in the kitchen by Dev on his phone. Priya answered every practice question with a deadpan delivery that made Ananya laugh so hard she fell off her chair. The casting team called within 10 days. But the real story hadn't even started yet. The first 3 rounds were brutal. The Martinezes were fast, strategic, and Carlos had a knack for reading the board. The Venkatesh family was down by 60 points heading into round 3. Rajesh was nervous, giving safe answers, playing not to lose. Priya was quiet. Ananya kept glancing at her mother with wide eyes, waiting. Round 4. The question went up. Name something your husband does that drives you crazy. Priya's hand was on the buzzer before Steve finished the sentence. Breathe. The moment that followed lasted 12 seconds. Steve Harvey did not speak for 12 consecutive seconds on his own television show. He sat on the floor. He grabbed the podium leg for support. He pointed at Priya. He tried to talk. He failed. He tried again. The audience was in hysterics. People grabbing strangers, doubled over, tears streaming. A camera operator's shoulders were shaking so hard the shot wobbled. Rajesh was standing at the other podium with his hands on his hips, shaking his head, grinning the grin of a man who had been married long enough to know this was completely accurate. "Ma'am," Steve finally managed, "that man is standing right there." "I know," Priya said. "That's the problem." Steve went down again. The audience roared. The taping stopped for 5 full minutes because the crew could not regain composure. A floor director was sitting on an equipment case with his head in his hands, laughing silently. A sound technician had removed her headset because her own laughter was feeding back into the system. The Venkatesh family swept the final 2 rounds. Priya hit 3 number 1 answers in a row. The last question: name something a mother sacrifices for her children. She answered, her dreams, without a pause. Number 1 answer. The studio fell completely silent, because everyone in that room understood that she was no longer playing a game. They won the game. They moved to fast money. Priya and Ananya scored 189 points on the first round. Rajesh came up for round 2. He needed 11 points. He scored 42. The board hit 231. They won $20,000. The family screamed. Shakuntala stood up in the front row with both fists raised above her head. An 81-year-old woman in a turquoise sari throwing her hands up like she'd just won the World Cup. Steve walked over to Priya. The celebration was still roaring. He waited for it to quiet. It didn't. He held up both hands. The studio fell completely silent. You said your husband's breathing drives you crazy. That was the funniest answer I've ever heard in 16 years of this show. But then you said, a mother sacrifices her dreams. And the way you said it, Steve paused. That wasn't about somebody else, was it? Priya's face changed. The armor she'd been wearing, the deadpan, the comedy, the controlled delivery, cracked. Her chin trembled once. She pressed her lips together. No, she said. That was about me. Tell me. And Priya told him. About the biochemistry degree, about the research on antibiotic-resistant bacteria, about the funding cut, about the parking lot, about 14 years in a windowless lab testing pill coatings, about the filing cabinet, about removing the letters from her email signature, about the morning her mother found her at 4:45 a.m. Steve Harvey stood motionless. The studio fell completely silent for the 3rd time, a silence so total that the hum of the studio lights became audible. Stop the taping, Steve said. A producer started to speak. Steve raised one finger without turning around. The producers stopped. Priya, let me tell you something. 17 years ago I was sleeping in a 1976 Ford Tempo. 3 years in that car. Nobody believed I would become anything. Nobody. I had a dream so big it embarrassed the people around me. And the only reason I'm standing on this stage is because I refused to let the world tell me my dream had an expiration date. He took a step closer. Your research isn't dead. It's in a locked cabinet. That means it still exists. That means you still have the key. 17 years ago, Priya, I was you. But Steve wasn't done. He pulled out his phone and dialed on speaker. The phone rang twice. Dr. Okafor, this is Steve Harvey. I'm standing on stage with a woman named Priya Venkatesh. She has a PhD-level research project on antibiotic-resistant bacteria in water systems. 18 months from completion. Her program was cut 14 years ago. I need someone at your university to look at her work. Can you do that? The voice on the other end, Dr. Adeze Okafor, Department Chair of Environmental Sciences at Emory University, said, Steve, antibiotic resistance in water systems is one of the most urgent problems in public health right now. Send me everything she has. I'll review it personally. Priya's knees buckled. Rajesh caught her. Ananya had both hands pressed over her mouth. Dev was crying, 13 years old, standing at the podium with tears running down his face and his fists clenched. Shakuntala was sitting in the front row with her palms pressed together in prayer, her eyes closed, her lips moving without sound. But Steve wasn't done. He walked to the Martinez family. Carlos Martinez had tears on his face. Without a word from Steve, Carlos turned to Priya and said, "My mother came from Mexico with nothing. She cleaned offices for 30 years. She never got her shot. You're getting yours." Diana Martinez nodded and squeezed her husband's arm. Their children were standing behind them, all three wiping their eyes. Steve announced that both families would receive the full $20,000. Then he walked to the camera, the single camera still running, and said, "Everyone watching at home." This woman left India with one suitcase and a folder full of research. She graduated first in her class. She was 18 months from changing how we understand clean water. And for 14 years, she tested pill coatings in a room with no windows, because she thought her dream was over. Her name is Priya Venkatesh. Remember it. Her father told her to make them remember her name. I'm telling you the same thing. The clip went live that evening. It reached 51 million views in 3 days. By the end of the month, it crossed 240 million. The hashtag Remember Her Name trended in 19 countries. The 12-second clip of Steve sitting on the floor became one of the most shared reaction clips in YouTube history, used in over 600,000 fan edits. But it was the second clip, the one where Priya said, "her dreams," that people couldn't stop watching. That 7-second moment was viewed on its own 90 million times. Dr. Okafor reviewed Priya's research within 3 weeks. She called it remarkably ahead of its time. Emory University offered Priya a visiting research fellowship starting January 2022. Priya completed her doctoral work in August 2023, 24 years after she began, and defended her dissertation in front of a committee that included 2 of the leading microbiologists in the country. She passed unanimously. When the committee chair said, "Congratulations, Dr. Venkatesh," Rajesh, sitting in the back row, started clapping before anyone else. Ananya recorded it on her phone. The video got 12 million views. Steve Harvey's foundation established the Priya Venkatesh Dream Completion Grant in 2022, funding women whose graduate research was interrupted by financial hardship or institutional failure. In its first 2 years, the grant supported 93 women across 27 universities. 31 of them completed their degrees. In a 2023 interview with Time magazine, Steve Harvey said, "I've been doing comedy for 40 years. The funniest answer I ever heard on Family Feud was, 'Breathe.' One word. No setup, no punchline. Just the truth from a woman who had been holding back everything else in her life for 14 years. And when she finally stopped holding back, that's when the whole world leaned in." Priya's research on antibiotic-resistant bacteria in municipal water systems was published in the journal Environmental Science and Technology in early 2024. It was cited 340 times in its first year. 3 municipalities adopted her testing protocol. The filing cabinet in the Venkatesh basement is unlocked now. It sits open, empty, in the corner of a room that Dev has started calling Mom's Library. Shakuntala Iyer flew back to Coimbatore and walked through her daughter's childhood village. She carried a printed copy of Priya's published paper. She stopped at the spot where Priya's father had burned the school books 50 years earlier. She set the paper down on the ground, placed a stone on top of it so the wind wouldn't carry it away, and said in Tamil, "She made them remember." Every Thursday night, Priya calls her mother in Coimbatore at exactly 7 p.m. They watch Family Feud together over video. Priya on the couch in Naperville with Dev's notebook of commentary beside her. Shakuntala in her kitchen with a thermos of chai. When the survey questions come up, Shakuntala always answers first. She is almost always right. Priya has started writing down her mother's answers in the margins of Dev's notebook. There are 214 entries so far. On the first page, in Priya's handwriting, it says, "Amma's answers are always better." A woman walked onto a game show stage, said one word, and put Steve Harvey on the floor. Then she said two more words, her dreams, and put herself back together. That is the distance between comedy and truth. And Priya Venkatesh crossed it in a single breath. If that answer hit you like it hit Steve, subscribe right now. Every week, we find the moments that start with laughter and end with something you carry for the rest of your life.